Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Bryan Wade. I am the Executive Director of Keystones Oral Histories. As Dr. Deisley talked about building, growing, and making. A lot of times it doesn't always go as smoothly as you'd like, but the process is one that you build one brick upon another. Keystones Oral History was created in 2017 as a result of me seeing a movie called We Were Soldiers by Mel Gibson that highlighted the first major battle in the Ia Drang Valley in Vietnam in 1965. After watching the movie, at the end, it gave credits of individuals who had lost their lives in that battle. And one of them, the gentleman, was named Samuel L. McDonald, who served with the 7th Cavalry in Vietnam, lost his life. So being a former educator, sometimes I don't even like saying that because I think you're always a lifelong learner or educator in some way. I said something needs to be done to really address the lack of curricular materials and documentaries, in terms of a tandem kind of collaboration. So in 2017, in the beginning of the year, I started raising funds, and by November, we had over 600 people at the Forum Auditorium, where we honored over 200 African-American veterans from various eras. And so eventually I've lived in New York for over 35 years. I did some of my teaching here in Harrisburg and also in North Carolina. So I started reaching out to individuals, and Terry Gendron from the Veterans Affairs, we had a meeting and he saw the materials and he said, Bryan, I'd love to bring this to York County. And so we set the ball in motion, and I started networking with individuals that I knew. And eventually Joan Mummert invited me to come and speak to the education committee or give a little presentation, which I did. That's where I met Dr. Deisley and several others. So they've seen this journey of building, growing, and making right before their eyes. So today's presentation basically will just be a general overview. It won't be a deep dive. Don't have that kind of time, but a general overview of the Keystones Oral Histories. We'll start off with a series of vignettes from the documentary, which has been aired on PBS twice in the last year. And then we'll go into just a general overview of the curriculum as far as the major component parts. So at this time, Ms. Saltman, if you would start the presentation, please.
Oh, sorry.
Okay, we can start the first. There you go.
My name is Ophelia Chambliss. I'm a local artist and a community historian. Casting Shadows is a series of paintings that I did that featured some of York's Black history, and it focused on the positive aspects of it. One of the paintings that I did as a part of that series was that of Aquila Wilson. The important part of that painting, it wasn't your traditional portrait, was that in the photograph that I was using as reference, he had on some medals. And it was important to me to make sure that I really represented those medals. So rather than paint them and the vagueness of how they were represented in that photograph, I did some research to find out what those medals actually stood for.
I got a better feel for what he did in the military from some letters that the United States Army sent to my grandmother in relationships to his death and her being eligible for his burial insurance and a pension. And from that, I kind of got invigorated to do some research. I was talking with a young lady, and I thought he was buried in Lebanon Cemetery because of the fact back in that period of time, African Americans weren't buried in other than Lebanon Cemetery. But come to find out through the article that Stephen wrote, he was buried in St. Patrick's Cemetery.
Being the first African-American mayor for the city of York in South Central Pennsylvania came with its challenges, though. Even while campaigning, we heard ugly words hurled at us. People said they would never vote for the N-word in the city of York. So, you know, it wasn't without its hiccups.
History! History!
Okay, thank you. What I'm going to do now is we're going to just basically do a really broad overview of the Keystones Oral Histories curriculum. The curriculum meets what they call Pennsylvania Common Core standards, also National Common Core and National Curricular Standards for Social Studies. So the curriculum was designed by Dr. Sherry Washington. And as far as I know, this is the first of its kind for York County. Keystones basically focuses on regional oral histories. So the curriculum is basically, except for one module, aligned with the curriculum. And we're very proud of this accomplishment. So if we go to the next slide, and I'd like just to give a statement regarding the curriculum overview. The Keystones Oral History documentary of local African-American veterans curriculum is structured to give students the opportunity to study the roles of certain African-American veterans of York County during significant historical times, such as the Civil War, World War I, World War II, look at the Underground Railroad, and Vietnam. This resource is a tool for growing and understanding the role of African-American veterans in our local history. It is intentionally envisions social studies instruction as an inquiry arc of interlocking and mutually reinforcing elements that speak to the intersection of the ideas and learners. The curriculum can be included in the traditional American history curriculum, offered as a standalone course, half-credit elective course, and an independent learning course for homeschoolers or community organizers. Next slide, please. One of the other major components within the curriculum is the curriculum map. Our curriculum is development in alignment with Common Core standards for literacy and history and social studies, and the college career of civic life C3 framework for the National Social Studies standards. This guide identifies which Common Core standards and C3 standards are addressed in each module of the course. The use of the question to spark curiosity, guide instructions, deepens investigations, acquires rigorous content, and applies knowledge and ideas in the real world settings for students to become active and engaged learners. The C3 framework, like the Common Core standards, emphasizes the acquisition and application of knowledge through an inquiry-based approach for learning to become rigorous, relevant, and meaningful students. The use of questions to spark curiosity, guide instructions, deepens investigations, acquires rigorous content, and apply knowledge and ideas in the real world settings for students to become active and engaged learners. The next is an example of the curriculum map. As it talks about, this is a C3 framework. It has 3 standards. Students will experience academic success. Students will examine social, political, conscious, and social cultural response. Students will use a critical lens through which they challenge inequivocal systems and access power and privilege. So again, this is just a brief overview, but that's a general structure for the C3 framework, which is in the curriculum. Next, please. The curriculum map. The curriculum map basically outlines the scope and sequence, provides modules, topics, module descriptions, learning objectives for each of the modules. We have over 10 modules in this. Next slide, please. And that's a look of just some of the structure and the way the curriculum is designed. But it gives the module topics, module descriptions, and learning objectives. Next slide, please. The inquiry design model, or known as IDM. Inquiry is a shift from studying to doing. Social studies, inquiry learning provides the opportunity for students to put on the lens of a historian, geographer, economist, or political scientist to gain knowledge and to deepen their understanding of the past and the world today. The inquiry method is a student-centered learning approach with the concept of students who are actively involved in the teaching and learning activities under the monitoring and supervision of teachers. The inquiry method requires higher order thinking and critical thinking to make conclusions. Next. Next. We also offer the lesson plan templates, and we use the Danielson models. I can't say all schools use that, but it seems like that's pretty common within York County. The Danielson lesson plan format is designed to be used in any classroom or teaching environment. The format incorporates important end steps in teaching, such as teacher reflection and self-evaluation. The Danielson lesson plan format focuses on 4 domains: planning, preparation, classroom environment, and it includes all the other standards of Common Core and Pennsylvania state standards in terms of what's in the lesson plan format. Next slide, please. These are just some examples of the lesson plan format using the Danielson model. And it comes with, this curriculum also comes with research links. So not only do you just have maybe initial plan, but you have a lot of other research linked information that you can use to expand the scope of the learning experience. Next slide, please. This is just another example of the Danielson lesson plan. And last. Thank you. All right. That again was a really brief and general overview of the curriculum. I'm prepared to take any general questions, and we've also made it available that if the school district would like to see the curriculum, they can email me and I'll send them a non-disclosure agreement. And then in turn, when the non-disclosure agreement is signed, I will send them the complete curriculum for their review. Okay, I'm open for questions.
I was wondering, do you think it could be used for independent study? We have, at the high school, we have up to 4 periods that aren't allocated. You need 28 credits to graduate, and then you have another 4 that kids take electives or whatever. So it would be easy to plug it in as an independent study if you think that would be useful.
Absolutely. And the beauty of this, you know, seeing that it's not a primary subject, schools can tailor it to their needs, particular needs. I know that one of the school districts we spoke at, the library system wants to incorporate it within their school. But yes, ma'am, it can be used as independent study. But again, the school ultimately can tailor it in terms of what suits their needs.
Great, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Bryan, remind me, you and I talked a little bit about the opportunity to take some of this curriculum and connect it to major anniversaries such as D-Day or Pearl Harbor, or any of the other military anniversaries that we experience in the general public. Do you have these identified in such a way that you could say this veteran was at VA, so that you can make those ready connections if you can't use the whole curriculum?
We haven't thought that out to the nth degree yet, in terms, we're still, how should I say, working through that. But yes, it can be contextually tied into like World War I with George A. Wood, or the Civil War with John Aquila Wilson. Part of it would be, to me, that's a lot of what you call strategic alignment, throughout the various systems, such as the museums or the libraries or even the schools. But I think schools can be creative, entities can be creative, with the curriculum, and they can tie it in independently in a way that they find that could enhance the learning experience, either within their schools or various institutions. So yes, it could be done strategically, like if we're going to be celebrating Veterans Day or something like that. Something can be done. It's just a matter of strategic planning by entities that are interested in doing that. And another addendum that I'd like to add is that we're not ending with just African-American veterans. We're planning on doing a 13-part series where we chronicle the whole African-American experience. So we're looking now, we've already started the research for the history of African-American educators in York County, which goes back to the 1800s. Doctors, lawyers, priests. So it'll be a comprehensive look at oral histories with curriculum for each of those particular domains. Also, we're looking to create a Latino oral history series. So we're open to being expansive, but as I will say, a lot of the work that has been done been done by local historians like Scott Mingus, like Samantha Dorn, like Jeff Kirkland. A lot of these individuals played a major role in terms of how I was able to compile this information. So I say, why reinvent the wheel? If the information's out there and people have done the work, why not work collaborative? The museum has been very helpful. Matter of fact, Ms. Mummert won the Keystone Volunteer Awards last year because of her collaborating with Keystone. So for me, I'm always looking, how can I make this a collaborative venture, not only within African American, but within York County, period. And I'm seeing a lot of positive signs to that effect. Anyone else?
Bryan, have you done any looking at what artifacts the History Center currently has that complements what you've presented, what you've pulled together here in Keystones?
I have not as yet. I know the closest I got to that was I had Nisi DeShields Moulton. She's in chapter 3 in the documentary. She's a genealogist, and we highlight a lot of the artifacts that she has that were contextual to various periods of time, like the Civil War, World War I. So we have done it on a micro level, but to do it expansively to where now we're being very strategic to looking at institutions like the museum or whatever, we have not done that as of yet. But we're open to it.
How many oral histories do you have at this point, and how many are you planning to do each year?
I have 2 oral histories done, Dauphin County, and I have York County. And as I said earlier, we're planning on doing for York County, if we can raise the money, the budget's almost close to $1 million, to do 13 documentaries with 13 curriculum. As far as I know, no one's doing this combination in the United States regionally, of these. So we're planning on starting probably by the spring, the history of African-American educators. But a lot of that is predicated upon raising funds. That's one of the reasons that we're selling the curriculum. And that's one of the ways that we're hoping to move closer to self-sustainability and not solely be relying on grants and things of that. But what kinds of things can we create that can enhance revenue for Keystones? So I hope I've answered your question.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else? If you'd like to get a copy of the curriculum, you can take this email and we can make sure that you get it. If you want to write this down, my email address is wright, RIGHT, word, WORD, the number 360 at gmail.com.
All right, thank you, Brian. We
You're
really
welcome.
appreciate the overview.
Thank you.
And like you said, we will send out your email along with this recording link if you wanted to share it with anyone that you may feel will benefit from learning more about this curriculum. I'm going to turn it over to now Valerie, who is going to talk about some of the offerings. We've been very lucky that we've seen a few of your schools, either virtually or in person this fall, and as few as a couple weeks ago with Troy's group. And we're pleased to continue to make those virtual offerings and in person. And Valerie's going to talk a little bit more about what we've got going on. Demute.
Sorry, I couldn't get myself unmuted there. So it's a little bit hard to follow that presentation, but and I suspect many of you are familiar already with what we do here at the History Center in terms of school programs, since I recognize many of you. So I want to say first and foremost, we are still doing our normal school tours. As Terry said, both in person and virtual. I know that virtual started as something during the pandemic, but I think we're planning on continuing to do those because they are just a little bit maybe more accessible to larger groups like Troy's classes or schools that can't organize buses. I know that it's difficult and expensive to get on field trips, so we want to keep that kind of as an option. So we do have our general site tours of the Agricultural and Industrial Museum, Colonial Complex, Historical Society Museum, Fire Museum. We do have a few samples of some more focused tours, and all of these things are available on our website. But we do focus tours of mostly of the Agricultural and Industrial Museum and the Colonial Complex. So those are available. We are eager to start planning some tours for the springs, and we do have a few inquiries about that. So if you are planning to have spring tours for your classes, or you know of educators that are thinking about what they'd like to do for field trips in the spring, we ask you to kind of consider us and inquire about those tours. Some of the other offerings that we have that I'm not sure are being as utilized as much as the tours are the virtual exhibits that we have, and we will continue to have. With those, there have been some previously designed like web quests and other sorts of materials that we can use in the classroom in conjunction with those. I believe that there are 5 virtual exhibits and story maps that have an educational component with them. So again, that's on our website. We have one on the Underground Railroad, one on Lewis Miller, one on Trailblazers, the Murals of York, and the York Plan. So all of those are available and ready to be used. We also have traveling trunks. I feel like those are kind of not used as much as I would like them to be. I think they're another way to make the museum accessible to students in classrooms that aren't able to make it to the museum. And that's something that I'm hoping that we will expand on a little bit more in terms of we have 2 trunks now, and hopefully kind of creating more of those. And in addition to that, some lesson plans to go with it. We have basically just an inventory now, but we're hoping to kind of make it a little bit easier for educators to use. Another thing that I don't think is utilized very much is we have lesson plans and other activities available, including some specific content that's been created by YCP. So I think we have had a relationship with them in the past in their education department and currently with their public history department. So I think that that's another thing that we have available that I don't think is being utilized. Educational videos, that was started kind of as a pandemic project, sort of this day in history and object and artifact highlights. And I believe that we are going to continue those. I think they were meant to be used as bell ringers in the classroom, but they're kind of another way to bring a little bit of the museum into the classroom in a very easy way. And finally, we started doing some various programs. I don't believe anyone here is involved in homeschools, but we started homeschool days, and we've had our second one today, and we've already seen a doubling in the amount of people attending. So hopefully we'll kind of continue to grow that as another option outside of the public school. But since most of you are familiar with what we do, and all of that information is available on the website, I want to talk more about our sort of projected offerings and sort of initiatives that we want to take this year and now. One of those initiatives is to better serve you, the educators, with what we're doing here at the museum. So we are hoping to create sort of an open communication with teachers throughout York County. I don't know if anyone has ever looked at the amount of schools that are in York County and the list of educators, it's a massive, massive list. So we're trying to figure out a way to do this as best as possible, whether that is communicating through principals. How I send out the email about tonight's meeting was through principals, whether that's contacting teachers directly. And if you have any input on this, I know I've asked many of you already about this and I've gotten some feedback, but we just want to make sure that we are giving the educators what they want and what they need. And we're thinking about starting up a newsletter to kind of a monthly newsletter to let you know what is happening at the museum with school programs in general. Surveys too. I want feedback from people that come to the museum, that people are thinking about coming to the museum, why they want to come to the museum, why they don't want to come to the museum. So if you or any of the educators in your schools or in your spheres, contact spheres, have thoughts on that, we kind of welcome and encourage any of that information. I think that we are planning on expanding on some of our current offerings. As I said, the traveling trunks, I think they're kind of a great, inexpensive way to bring history into the classroom. So we have, I believe, a grant for this fiscal year to kind of expand and improve that. So I think I'd like to add an additional trunk or trunks, depending on how much we can kind of squeeze out of that budget. We have maybe adding World War II, maybe adding civil rights. So there's a few topics that we're kind of tossing around, which we hope to kind of do that. And again, adding the actual lesson plans to the trunks. A lot of traveling trunks throughout the United States have actual like lessons with them rather than just an inventory. So we're hoping to kind of do some of that. More digital content. We have a new digital programs coordinator, and we just had a meeting today with YCP about more students being involved with story maps and digital content. So we're kind of hoping to expand on what we have there with additional activities and webcasts and other sorts of lessons. Some of the other things that we were thinking about doing are summer programs, genealogy camp. We haven't really hashed that out to its fullest, but that's also something that will be a student educational experience. And finally, we probably not this year, but maybe in the fall, depending on where we are in the pandemic landscape, but having a YCHC employee, probably me, actually go to schools and do presentations, whether that's with a traveling trunk, whether that's with some of the educational artifacts that we have, again, to make it a little bit more accessible for students who are unable, excuse me, to make the trip to the museum, again, with planning with buses and all of that. I know that it's difficult sometimes. So I just want to make the museum as accessible as possible for educators. So if you don't stop me now, I will continue to talk. So I think we'll just kind of end it there. And I'm sure that Mr. Wade and myself would welcome any sort of questions from anyone. Continuing on.
Thank you, Valerie. I do, one of the things that she is also working on is just to continue on some of the things that the communication lines. Valerie is going to present to the Curriculum Council because of this invitation that went out and the contact that she was able to make with Dr. Deisley and others. We have made small inroads into getting to the curriculum folks and in York County. So a presentation will be had probably, I'm going to guess now, in February, or it was either going to be this Friday or February. So we're going to say that it's going to be in February, and we're excited about being able to bring our offerings and our partnerships and the things that we're doing in the community to a larger group. And I'm thankful that we've had this opportunity through this presentation.
If I could just chime in quick, Terry, and speaking to the virtual tour that Valerie did for our 8th graders, I did a really quick informal survey with my kiddos, and 5 out of 65 have been to downtown York. And it's thoroughly amazing that we're 10 miles away as the crow flies, but they had no clue what's there. And that speaks to a larger issue, I think, around our county with the educators, that I don't think our educators have any clue what's available to them, not only at the History Center, but the surrounding area of just what's there and we have access to. As far as the virtual tour, we did the Gates House and the Plow Tavern and the Colonial Courthouse. And Valerie, all the things that are there, she did a great job. She asked for questions, and 8th graders want to know what this certain flag is or what's that bucket hanging on the wall. And her wealth of knowledge in the limited time that she's been there is absolutely phenomenal. The only feedback that I would give, and I don't know how to do this without interrupting the historical integrity, is there was a big struggle with our Wi-Fi, and there were lags. We had to sign in and out, and that's nobody's fault. But if we're going to get more school districts that are going to take the time to perhaps pay for the virtual tour, I think something needs to be done with what we don't see as far as the Wi-Fi goes, and making sure that the connectivity issues are addressed before the next large group comes in. It was, and she handled it like a pro. I know it was frustrating for her because the hotspot was literally going from room to room, and in some rooms it was solid, and in some rooms it was just totally glitchy. So the tours are invaluable. I think we're going to communicate here in the next few weeks to do the Ag and Industrial Museum. But I think back to my original point, teachers don't know what they don't know, and somehow, some way, we have to get the word out to the different districts as far as just what's available to them. And I will certainly be an advocate and help in any way possible that whatever you guys see fit, as far as I would be more than welcome to go to other districts as well, and just communicate what's out there.
Thank you. Thank you, Troy.
One other avenue for connection that I was just thinking of as you were talking about ways to reach educators. We have a really great career center at Central, and I know some of the other schools do. We've had presentations through there on IT and other topics. Our career center staff tries to arrange internships, and I know it's not always possible at the high school level, but we used to have Dan and Par come and talk to our community service classes. We don't have that class anymore, but I was thinking maybe career centers might be another, and that's what's at YCal, or maybe another avenue to reach educators.
Thank you. Any other comments, questions?
Terry, I'll put a shameless plug in for a book club that we're going to start on February 28th. And it loosely ties back to what Bryan talked about. Our first selection will be reading the book, The Ground Swallowed Them Up by Scott Mangus. And it focuses on York County's role in the Underground Railroad. So you're welcome to join us February 28th. Doesn't cost you anything. And I'll give you a secret. You can actually get by without having read the book, but it will be better if you have read the book. Okay, we'll take what we can get at this point. But it does, the book does highlight local stories and local people.
I think at last check, I think we have about 17 people signed up for it. So it's getting a good response. We're actually planning to do a little bit of adding, not only talking about the book, but talking about some of the archival material that we have in our library and archives, or any artifacts that we might have that reference in there, so you can see those as well. So it's a little kind of like Scott said, maybe you don't have to read the book, but you can learn something if you join the book club. Thank you, Scott. Any other comments, questions? All right, I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to toss it to Joan for a few last words, parting thoughts.
Well, I just want to thank you all again for your time, for participating with us, for giving us some feedback. Troy, thanks for that. Information about the hotspot, I just emailed Gail, our IT person, and see what we could do there, because we definitely don't want to disappoint our schools, and we definitely want to improve the connections. Bryan, thank you so much for helping us understand what Keystones is in its full package and what it can be, even in smaller segments. I think we're very excited about what you have accomplished and how that complements all the work that all of us do in the field of history. I look forward to your other projects as well, and bringing those to fruition. If we can help, we're here to help. Valerie, thank you for helping us understand where we're headed in our educational programs. I am really excited about kind of revamping some of the programs we've had, like the traveling trunks, which we've had for a long time, but have kind of been relegated to the corners. I worked at Maryland Historical Society back in the day. It's now the Maryland Center for History and Culture, but we had 12 traveling trunks and associated characters that would go out into the schools all over Maryland, primarily Baltimore County, but all over Maryland. So I think there's lots of opportunity, particularly in this environment where not everybody can come to the History Center. So we're certainly all ears in terms of listening to you, the folks who are educators, your ideas, how the History Center can be a resource to you. We have a tremendous number of assets that Scott talked about, 400,000 pieces of, and I don't mean individual papers, I mean books and photographs and videos in the library and archives that we have here at the History Center, and another 100,000 three-dimensional items, anything from small little fountain pens to large A-frame compressors. So we interpret a lot of history. So if you have an idea, I think we're certainly interested in listening.